Maple Ridge Estates was designed to be a sanctuary of predictable, high-end tranquility. It was a gated labyrinth of colonial-style homes, manicured fescue lawns, and a silence so profound it felt manufactured. When I first pulled through the iron gates in my midnight blue Porsche 911 Turbo, I didn't see a neighborhood. I saw a place to finally shed the weight of 25 years in the United States Marshal Service. I wanted to be the man who gardened on Saturdays and forgot how to look for exits in a crowded room. The house I chose sat at the end of a deep cul-de-sac. It was a minimalist structure of glass and stone, a sharp contrast to the brick-heavy aesthetic favored by the community. I moved in with the efficiency of a man used to living out of a tactical bag, settling into a routine that involved early morning runs and late-night reading. My first interaction with the local hierarchy occurred exactly 4 days after I closed on the property. I was in my driveway, buffing a layer of wax onto the Porsche, when a shadow fell across the hood. I looked up to see a woman in her mid-50s, dressed in a tennis skirt and a visor that seemed to be pulled low like a combat helmet. She held a clipboard against her chest as if it were a ballistic shield.
"I'm Kate.
HOA president," she said, her voice a sharp, practiced staccato. "You're the new resident in 402. We haven't seen your vehicle registration on file with the committee yet." "I'm Elias," I replied, standing up and wiping my hands on a microfiber cloth. "I'll get the paperwork to the office by the end of the week." "Nice to meet you." Kate didn't smile. She walked a slow circle around the Porsche, her eyes narrowing as they traced the lines of the car. "This is a very loud vehicle, Elias. Both aesthetically and, I imagine, acoustically. We have strict noise ordinances between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. And we prefer vehicles to be stored in the garage, not displayed like a showroom." "It's just a car, Kate. And it fits the garage just fine. I was just giving it some air." She stopped and looked me dead in the eye. "In Maple Ridge, we value communal cohesion. Those who don't participate in the HOA meetings, those who choose to live as outsiders, often find that the community doesn't suit them. I'd suggest you show up to the budget hearing on Tuesday. It would be a shame for you to start off on the wrong foot." "I think I'll pass on the politics," I said, turning back to the car. "I've had enough of that to last a lifetime." The air between us chilled instantly. Kate scribbled something on her clipboard, a sharp, angry scratching sound, and walked away without another word. I didn't know it then, but I had just declared war on the Queen of Maple Ridge. 2. The rise of the security division. The harassment began with the paper trail. Within a week, my mailbox was stuffed with bright yellow notices. Violation: driveway maintenance. Reason: excessive gloss on pavement. Warning: unsanctioned vehicle positioning. Reason: reverse parked in driveway, headlights must face the garage. Official notice: HOA Security Division, security audit pending. I stared at the HOA Security Division letterhead. In all my years in federal law enforcement, I had never heard of an HOA possessing a dedicated security wing. I checked the community bylaws I'd signed during closing. There was no mention of a security division, only a safety committee meant to discuss streetlights and neighborhood watches. The escalation moved from paper to physical presence. A few nights later, while I was reading in my darkened living room, a high-intensity beam of light cut through my windows, sweeping across the walls like a searchlight. I walked to the window and peered through the blinds. 2 men were standing at the edge of my driveway. They were dressed in tactical black vests with white block lettering on the back, HOA Cops, Security Division. They wore heavy utility belts laden with flashlights, radios, and what looked like handcuffs, though they lacked any official badges or state-issued patches. They were LARPing, live-action role-playing. To a civilian, they might have looked intimidating. To a former U.S. Marshal who had spent years hunting fugitives in the worst corners of the country, they looked like 2 bored men in expensive costumes playing a dangerous game of pretend. The next morning, I intercepted Kate at the community clubhouse. "Kate, who are the men in the black vests?" I asked. "Those are our community safety officers," she said, her chin tilted up. Given the influx of new elements in the neighborhood, the board felt it was necessary to establish a more proactive presence. "They report directly to me." "They aren't law enforcement, Kate. They're private citizens in vests. Shining lights into people's homes is harassment, and if they try to detain anyone, they're looking at kidnapping charges." Kate chuckled, a cold, dry sound. "You're so defensive, Elias. Perhaps if you weren't hiding something, you wouldn't be so worried about a little extra light. They are perfectly legitimate. You would do well to respect their authority." I chose to observe. My training had taught me that when someone is acting on a delusion of power, the best thing to do is document it. I installed 4 high-definition, infrared-capable 4K cameras around my property, concealed in the eaves of the house. I also installed a dashcam in the Porsche that activated upon sensing motion. 3. The midnight vandalism. The tension reached its breaking point on a sweltering Tuesday afternoon. I was in my home office when I heard a faint, high-pitched hiss, the unmistakable sound of pressurized air escaping a tire. I didn't run to the window. Instead, I opened my laptop and pulled up the live feed of the driveway. The 2 HOA cops were there. One was a tall, wiry man named Miller. The other was a shorter, thick-set man named Vance. Miller was standing guard, his hand resting on a walkie-talkie, looking nervously toward the street. Vance was crouched beside the rear driver's side wheel of my Porsche. I watched as he pulled a serrated folding knife from his belt and drove it into the sidewall of the tire. He didn't stop there. He moved to the front tire, his face twisted in a grin of petty satisfaction. I felt a cold, familiar calm settle over me. I wasn't angry, I was operational. I stepped out of my front door and stood on the porch, watching them. They didn't see me at first. "That's a federal felony you're working on," I said, my voice projecting with the authority I had used on 100 door kicks. Vance jumped, nearly cutting his own hand. He stood up, the knife still open and glinting in the sun. Miller puffed out his chest, stepping forward and placing his hand on his belt as if reaching for a weapon he didn't have. "This is private HOA business, sir," Miller shouted. "We are conducting a mandatory safety impoundment of a non-compliant vehicle. Step back inside the residence immediately. You're trespassing, you've committed felony vandalism, and you're impersonating officers," I said, stepping off the porch and walking toward them. "That car is registered with a federal tag under my retired credentials. You just sabotaged government-linked property." Vance's confidence faltered. He looked at the knife in his hand, then at the Porsche, then at me. But Miller, fueled by the authority Kate had gifted him, didn't back down. "I told you to step back," Miller roared. He grabbed the knife from Vance's hand and stepped toward me, raising the blade in a threatening gesture. In the world of the U.S. Marshals, this is called a lethal threat. My body moved before my conscious mind finished the thought. I stepped inside his reach, my left hand parrying the knife arm upward while my right palm drove into his chest to disrupt his balance. I gripped his wrist, applied a quick, violent torque, and drove him toward the pavement. There was a sickening crack, the sound of a radius and ulna snapping under the weight of a professional takedown. Miller hit the ground with a howl of agony, the knife clattering away. Vance didn't stay to help his partner. He turned and bolted toward the woods behind the houses, his HOA cop's vest flapping in the wind. 4. The arrival of the law. I didn't chase Vance. I put my knee into the small of Miller's back, pinned his uninjured arm, and dialed 911. "This is Elias Thorne," I told the operator. "I am a retired U.S. Marshal. I have one suspect detained at 402 Maple Ridge Estates. Multiple felonies in progress. Send an ambulance and the sheriff." The county deputies arrived in less than 6 minutes. They knew the neighborhood well. They had been fielding complaints about Kate's security division for months, but they had never had the evidence to act. As the paramedics loaded a screaming Miller into the ambulance, I handed the deputies the SD card from my security system. We stood by the Porsche, looking at the slashed tires. "He's going to lose that arm's full range of motion," the deputy said, looking at Miller. "You really did a number on him." "He came at me with a knife on my property," I said. "I gave him exactly what the law allowed." An hour later, they caught Vance. He had tried to bury his vest in a shallow ditch, but a K-9 unit found him shivering in a drainage pipe 2 miles away. Under the pressure of a felony assault charge, the HOA cops broke instantly. They didn't want to go to prison for Kate. They handed over their phones. They showed the deputies the text messages from Kate: "Target the Porsche today. Give him a reason to leave. I'll cover the costs." She had even sent them a photo of my Marshal credentials I'd accidentally left on the dashboard once, with a caption, "He thinks he's untouchable. Show him he's not." The fall of the Queen. The arrest of Kate was a spectacle the neighborhood would talk about for decades. The sheriff's deputies didn't go to her house. They went to the HOA clubhouse during the very budget hearing she had told me to attend. They walked in while she was mid-sentence, lecturing a neighbor about the color of their mailbox. When the handcuffs clicked shut, the room went silent. "Kate Pike, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit felony vandalism, criminal impersonation of law enforcement, and solicitation of assault," the lead deputy announced. Kate didn't go quietly. She screamed about her rights and her authority, until she was pushed into the back of a patrol car. The legal aftermath was a landslide. The security division was dissolved by court order the next morning. The HOA's insurance carrier, seeing the criminal charges, immediately pulled their coverage, leaving the association, and Kate personally, liable for millions in potential damages. In court, the evidence was insurmountable. The 4K footage of the tire slashing, combined with the text messages and the HOA cop's testimony, left Kate with no defense. She was sentenced to 4 years in state prison. Miller received 3 years for the assault, his arm permanently scarred and stiff from the break. Vance took a plea deal for 18 months. 6. The return of the silence. A week after the sentencing, I stood in my driveway as a flatbed truck arrived to pick up my Porsche. The tires were flat, the rims sitting on the concrete, but the car was still beautiful. My neighbors, people I had never spoken to, began to walk over. They didn't bring clipboards. They brought coffee and apologies. They told me stories of the years of quiet terror Kate had put them through, the fines they had paid just to be left alone, and the fear they had felt of the men in black vests. "You did what none of us could," an elderly woman from across the street said. "You brought the real law." I watched the truck pull away with my car. I looked at the cul-de-sac, now free of the fake patrols and the fluorescent warning slips. The silence of Maple Ridge Estates was different now. It wasn't the manufactured silence of compliance, it was the actual, honest quiet of a neighborhood that could finally breathe. I went back inside, sat in my living room, and picked up my book. I wasn't an outsider anymore. I was just a man at home, and for the first time since I'd moved in, the air felt perfectly clear.